Hello and welcome to What Lingers, the podcast where we uncover the questions behind people's stories. I am Christian Figueroa.
And I'm Liz Melkor. Together, we're the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, where once a month, 10 storytellers get on stage in front of 200 people and share true personal stories around a theme.
It's always an incredible night, but there is a catch. We always have lingering questions for the storytellers.
In our podcast, What Lingers, we get the answers. In our third season, we jump right in and take you back to that stage. You'll hear the original story told that night.
Then, we sit down with the storyteller for a deeper conversation to explore what lingers for all of us.
Just a quick note, since these recordings are from the actual stage, the audio might be a bit raw.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Hello, my name is Harjeet Johal, and this is my story of courage. Just so you know, I've got a bit of a stammer, so just bear with me. So my story is that my courageous moment is that I ran an ultramarathon called the Marathon des Sahara, which is a marathon that takes place every year in the Sahara Desert. And it's 150 miles, which is just under 300 kilometers. It's a self-sufficiency run, so you carry your entire life on your back in about 20 kilos, well, a bit under that, 15 or 20 kilos of stuff. And for one whole week, you just run during the day in the Sahara, and at night you sleep in the Sahara. And I know what you're all thinking. This guy, really? And no, don't worry, absolutely. And indeed, you all be absolutely right. I was not at all an athlete. I really am not an athlete now. I did not come from any athletic background, far the opposite. My family encouraged as much eating and as sitting as is humanly possible. Before I signed up to the event, the most I'd ever run was 2 miles, which is about just under 4 kilometers. And when I say run, it was like a sort of like an ambulant kind of wobble. And there was no precedent in my family, in my background, to do anything athletic. I'm from a business family, I'm from an immigrant family in the UK, and our sole purpose, what we're taught, is to the fire under our feet, to start a business and just keep on going. But no one said, but also you can go and run the Sahara. I, by pure happenstance, was watching TV, which was something that I used to do quite a bit, and I saw this documentary about the marathon itself. I turned it on and I thought, oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. These people taking themselves out of their lives and putting them in the most extreme situations. It's mind-blowing, it's vaguely stupid, it's just absolutely insane. It's so the opposite of how I've been brought up. I have to do it. I called up my friend Roland, who is significantly more athletic than I am, and I said, turn on the television now, because I think we should do this. And he turned on the TV, and he said, well, I shan't swear, he went beep off. And then he hung the phone up. And then 30 seconds later, he called them, said, all right now. So fast forward 6 months of the most intense training that certainly I've ever done. I looked vaguely like a runner in the... I passed all right in spandex. I looked kind of like, almost like a runner, but that was about it, really. But I trained very, very hard, and I'm understating how much I train. My goodness, I train. Because it is considered to be the hardest marathon on earth. And just remember, I've never ran before this. Apart from a sprint to the fridge every now and then. What I must tell you, 2 years before doing this, I was around 110 kilos of pure, solid, impressive fat. So I reduced my weight, and then I decided to do this. So I turned up at the airport, and for me, I thought, well, I'm going on a flight. I'll dress as though I'm going on a flight. So I wore very stylish skinny jeans, I wore a vintage leather jacket, I wore very impressive sort of cowboy boots, but not really, and my backpack, or my kit, was in an old Louis Vuitton suitcase that I was wheeling with catwalk elegance behind me. And I headed towards a special part of the terminal where our flight was being checked in, because there was a few hundred people from the UK. And as my boots made that all too familiar sound on the floor, the terminal of 200 or 300 pretty serious people turned around, and there was a pin drop silence. And all these people were dressed in cargo wear and fleece, and if I looked like I was just kind of like coming off a catwalk, they looked like they were just about to go to war. And my friend was just burying his head in his hand. I said, "What? I'm going on a plane." And then as I walked to the check-in desk, I heard someone say behind me, "Why is he here? He'll never do it." Spoiler alert, I did. And so to fast forward, it was 7 days of absolute hell, 7 days of blistering heat, 7 days of blistering blisters, bleeding blistering blisters, alliteration. 7 days of losing 7 of my 10 toenails with blisters. 7 days of confronting one's greatest fears, one's greatest hopes, one's greatest joys, and 7 days without gin and tonic, for me, pretty serious. But then, after 7 days, I crossed over the finishing line with the terrifying Sahara, with all the sand dunes, the mountainous sand dunes behind me, the salt flats where people twisted their ankles, the dry ravines where people were having IV drips because they were dehydrated. And I crossed that finishing line for my own personal offence. I joined, what I always say, in a slightly prepackaged way, the legions of the brave. And that is not a scripted thing, it's how I feel. I went from being someone from quite a predictable background, on quite a predictable trajectory of being quite an obedient, good little Indian businessman, to being someone who has just opened the world and could do absolutely anything. And so when I think about the idea of courage, that one electric moment of courage, of me turning on that TV and deciding to do this event and challenging everything that I've been told that I should be doing, that one electric moment has fueled me for the rest of my life. That courage continues to carry forward, and it gave me the courage to be true to myself and come out as gay. It gave me the courage to avoid an arranged marriage, because that's a whole other story. It gave me the courage to follow my dream and become a writer. It gave me the courage to see this incredibly beautiful world and travel around it. Courage to move to Lisbon and even stand on the stage, I suppose. And it allowed me to walk away from the shadows that we all sort of convene every now and again, and just choose the bright, blinding light. But most of all, I suppose it continues to give me the courage to smile down fear whenever I see it, grin, and then just keep on going anyway. Well, most of the time. Thank you.
Hello again, and Harjeet, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the invitation to come to What Lingers. For the people who are listening at home and around the world, would you mind introducing yourself and share a little bit of who you are with us?
Sure, and thank you both for inviting me. My name is Harjeet Johal. I'm based in Lisbon, and I am a writer, a commentator, and a broadcaster. And I'm 46 years old, which means I've done a lot more stuff than that as well. But that's the things that I am at the moment.
Amazing. And you're originally from England.
Originally from the UK, but I moved out a fair few years ago and I've lived in lots of different places. And I'm here in Portugal now. Before that was Spain, and who knows where we'll be next.
Harjeet, we know you have a podcast. Would you mind telling us a little bit about it?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. It's called The Boy Likes Gin. It's not actually about gin. It's a little short form podcast. Every 2 weeks, I put a new episode out, and it's not recorded in any big fancy way. It's just me talking about the things that have emotionally impacted me in those 2 weeks. And it can be an issue with a friend who's going through a certain traumatic moment, or it can be me realizing my parents are getting older. I grew up with a terrible stammer and I didn't have voice. And this is my time to have voice. And it's done in my sort of shameless way that I don't really care what people think about it. So yes, it's called The Boy Likes Gin, and it's available on Spotify and Apple and all the other places.
And I've listened to it, and it's amazing. And they're beautiful audio essays, I would say.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, I'm wondering if we can start at the beginning. And it isn't actually the beginning of your story, but I think in some ways it's the beginning of the story that we end up hearing, because in the middle of the story, you talk about you used to be 110 kilos. And then you lost an enormous amount of weight, which is, I think, both a physical and a mental feat. And then you go on to do another huge physical and mental feat. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that enormous weight loss, how that happened, and how that maybe influenced your choice to do the marathon.
Sure. I was a large child, and then I became a large teenager, and then I became a large young adult, and I would have thought of myself to be overweight up until about the age of 20. And food was, for me and for so many people, it was sort of a refuge. It was that sort of place that where we go to. And I really enjoyed that refuge. But I slowly got heavier and heavier. I didn't realize I was actually as heavy as I was until it was May the 15th, 2000. Yes, in 2000. It's very specific. It was 9:45 a.m. Sorry to be so specific. But I just dropped my parents off at the airport, and I was at home in the bathroom, and I was just about to get in the shower, and I looked at myself, and I just had a double take. I saw this person that I hadn't seen before. And I said, my goodness, you really are. We need to sort this out. And it needs to start right now, because so much is attached to this. It's not just how heavy you are. There are so many things behind this. And so that day it began, and I lost 40 kilos in about 6 months. I was a lot younger then, so the skin was very elastic. So it was easier to do. And I just threw myself into this idea of what will the next version of me be? How will he look like and how will he feel? And I just started walking and then going to the gym. And I'd never been into a gym before. I'd never done anything before. And once the weight sort of started to fall off, which it does in the early stages quite quickly, it instantly transformed. And a whole new world opened up to me, a world of just different people talking to me who grew up with a stammer, being able to talk more and stop stammering, and then being able to wear clothes that I hadn't worn before. And sort of like I can finally wear floral shirts without me looking like sort of like a garden tent. And it was really a whole different way of being. And then it just snowballed into this increase in self-worth, an increase in ability, and in the idea that, well, if I can do this, what else can I do?
I'm really curious because you mentioned something in the story about your family being the quite opposite of an ultramarathoner, and like probably sitting and eating a lot. And now you mentioned, I didn't realize I was this way until I was 20. And the thing is that I was also like a big kid and a big teenager. But since a very young age, everyone around me were making comments about my body, my weight, even my dad was really annoyed about that. I got a lot of bullying for being an overweight kid. So it kind of strikes me that you didn't probably suffer any of this until you were 20. And also because this decision came internally. You look at yourself into the mirror, like what's not coming from the outside, right?
Yes. I mean, my brother did his fair share of normal sibling bullying.
Yeah,
But that's just, I kind of ignored that at the age of about 9. But no, I mean, I was never told by my family that I was overweight. And my sister, who I'm very close to, they're always asked, am I overweight? And she said, no, even now, she doesn't consider sort of body weight to be, connected to body image. It's two very different things. So she was always quite amazing like that. I wish someone had said to me in a constructive way
Yeah.
that I think for your own health and for your own mental well-being, more than anything else, more than being able to sort of run through deserts, just the idea of feeling better about yourself. I think you should try and kind of address your food. But no, and my mom is an excellent cook, and she enjoys the idea of providing and creating new things. And I enjoyed that provision. I mean, it was a great thing. So, but no, I wish I think, it's an interesting point, Christian. I think there wasn't any external voices, but I sort of would like there to have been constructive external voices, not necessarily, attacking voices, because had the change come earlier, well, I missed out on quite a bit of those formative teenage years of just being social and being able to sort of, kind of make new connections and discover new parts of oneself. And even at university, it was sort of like a different experience. And I wish the change had been earlier, because then I would have experienced more. But I've made up for it. So I won't stop talking now. You can't shut me up. And I'm wearing all the floral shirts as possible.
I know. I'm like, got palm trees on your shirt today, right?
Yes, I know.
Okay, so you do this big weight loss, and then you're sitting there and you're watching the marathon. And what year is it when you decide to do this?
Well, the marathon was in 2004, but the decision then was in 2003. Gosh, it's so long ago. In probably September, October. Yeah, 22 years ago. Yeah. Gosh, I'm old.
Me too.
And it was 6 months before.
So you're watching the documentary, you call your friend Roland, and you convince Roland to go with you on this adventure. Does Roland end up on the marathon as well?
Yeah, he does. And Roland then, and in many ways now, was the polar opposite of me, in that he was quite tall. He was very physically able. He was a very fit young person from a young child. He's a tree surgeon, which means he's forever running up and down trees all day long with chainsaws and things. And I just would say hello to a tree, and that's it. That's my relationship with trees. And I called him, and yes, and he said that I was insane, and he swore a bit and hung the phone up, and which sort of reassured me a bit, because I wasn't coming from this from a physical aptitude angle. I was coming from this from this is insane, but other human beings do it. I'm a human being. Go, I can do it. But he was coming from it's a physical endeavor. And I never really saw it as that. I just saw it as, well, our arms and legs will kind of do what our mind tells them to do. And so then he called me back. He sort of twigged what was involved, because he's a mighty and brilliant human being. And he always liked the idea of challenge. And that's one of the reasons we're friends. And straight away, he realized the challenge behind it and called back and said, all right, let's do it. And then we did. I mean, it was a while to get on the waiting list, but the training for me started that next day. I decided in my head I was doing it.
I was just going to say, that's my next question, is because you say you only trained for 6 months, but maybe it ends up being longer. I actually want to know your training plan and how many miles or kilometers you were running in the beginning per week, and then how many at the very end. I'm just like so fascinated by the ability to train that in such a short amount of time.
It was really compressed, and also made more intense by the fact that I couldn't really run. The next day, I think, after making the decision, I went for a run. I think I managed to do about 1.5 miles without, and then I almost died. I mean, it was really bad. And I didn't have one leg was going this way, one leg was going that way, shoulders were going funny. Probably the first time in my life I've ever actually gone for a run. And I thought, right, we have got some work to do here. And at the gym, which I'd already joined, but I didn't know what I was doing at the gym. I just sort of walk around from machine to machine, wearing really stylish gym kit. That was about it. I didn't know what to do, listening to various tunes on my earphone. But my friend who's a personal trainer, I said to her, I want to do this thing, and I am doing it. And I expected her to say, don't be ridiculous. She said, okay, that's fine. We're going to have to train twice a week here in the gym, and then here's your program. And well, it was beyond her skill set. I mean, but she could get me into a physical sort of place. But the running was really up to me. So on the question of how much did I run, started off a few miles a day, well, every other day. And then something clicked in my brain where I realized that if I found this pace, called it my all-day pace, I could just go like Forrest Gump, and I would just could not be stopped. And I could run for, it wasn't very fast at all, but I could just keep on going. And as my fitness was increasing and my muscularity was increasing, my general flexibility, that the pace would stay the same, but the distance would increase. So one day I found myself running 40 miles without realizing it, because I just had my things in my ears and off I went. And it was like all you were designed to do is run at that pace. It was quite extraordinary. So yes, I'm sorry, my brain's going to the various different moments where I decided then to run without my shoes.
Let's slow down. So you're training with shoes and then you decide to train without shoes? Please tell me about this transition.
Yeah, because in the Sahara, there's lots of stones and sand and things. You get blisters all the time. And my feet were very privileged feet. And they were very soft, like little princess feet. And I needed to sort them out and make them sort of like proper feet. And so they need to be hard. And I thought, well, if I ran without shoes, I was staying at my parents' house and they've got this long drive that's like quarter of a mile long drive. And I thought, if I do a few miles up and down there every now and again, while wearing the backpack of a few kilos, because you have to carry about 18, 20 kilos of weight on your back. So I was training with a backpack. I thought, let's try running without shoes. And actually, I'm glad I did it. I only managed a few runs, but then it did sort of, well, I don't know whether it helped, but it reminded me of how hard it's going to be. And it was, if anything, it was a good pain training for what the actual run was like. And then I would do things like I would get back from an evening with my friends at midnight, which for me is late. And I would just put my trainers on and start running. I just opened up what is normal and acceptable. And I just went for it. A normal person would say, you don't go for a run at midnight. And I said, well, I've got to do this mad thing. Therefore, I've got to think in a mad way. Therefore, take off your cowboy boots and put on your trainers and go for a run.
Yeah. Was there a point on your training process that you thought of quitting? Like, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe
there was never a moment, ever a moment that I ever thought. And that makes me sound really sort of truculent and brave. It wasn't. It's just I'm probably quite stupid and stubborn. But there was, from the moment I saw it on television, I thought I was going to do this. I'm going to cross the line. And it was hard. It was horribly hard. And it was lonely and it was new. I had no one to ask and talk to because those people that were close to me didn't know anything about this. I had no support network at all, which sort of helps you in life, I suppose.
would you be able to take a moment to sit and reflect, like, what was the ultimate motivation to do this? Because we've been talking a lot about the whole process, but you mentioned something about the end of the story, about how empowered you felt after completing this process and how these experiences empower you to do other things that we're probably going to talk about later. But at this point of your moment, you saw this documentary on TV and then you immediately start training and you didn't stop for a minute. You didn't doubt yourself. Can you point what was the motivation behind all of this stamina?
There was one direct motivation, absolutely. And that motivation was that it was something that no one in my family had ever done before. And it wasn't me trying to be some sort of pioneer or anything. It was just me having this instinct that there must be something other than a family legacy that I am part of. My family, a very successful business family, and my father was an immigrant from India, as is my mum. My father came from a very poor background, and he made a tremendous success of his life. In one generation, the family was completely changed, and that's a huge shadow to live under. And often the instinct is, well, that's where we're going to stay then for a few generations under that shadow, or just helping build up that legacy. But I was never convinced from a very young age that is where I belong. Even though I did join the family business, there was this sort of unscripted instinct that I had. I couldn't quite put words to it, that there are other things that I can do and try. And this was so opposite to anything that I've been brought up to believe that is worthy, that is where one should spend one's endeavors and time and energy. Because immigrant families normally spend it on making more money because they don't have any money and they have to protect and they have to take care of their families and they have to sort of, build themselves stronger, which is honorable and brilliant and wonderful. And I'm very grateful for my parents having that instinct. But I was born in Britain. I was born in a very comfortable way. And then maybe I thought I had other avenues to explore. And though I was never going to become an ultramarathon runner for the rest of my life, or an athlete in any form. It was a way to just probe this otherness. And so that was it. Yeah, that's exactly the motivation, was that.
And what was their reaction to when you told your parents, I'm doing this? What did they say?
I think they thought it was just another crazy ideas that I'd had, because I specialize in crazy ideas, and they weren't not supportive. They were like, oh, okay, that's nice. All right, well, make sure you wear nice T-shirts because it's quite hot. But they didn't think I was going to do it. They didn't think I was going to see it through. They just thought it was this thing that a young 20-year-old, 20-ish, whatever old was, was going to just fizzle out. And then when they saw me running in the middle of the night and they saw me just not stopping, then they started to get a bit concerned. They said, you don't have to do this. You don't need to do it. It's, it's serious and you're going to hurt yourself. And my uncle, who I'm very close to as well, my dad's younger brother, he sat me down in his office. He said, you don't need to do this. You really don't. It's great that you're trying it, but don't do it. I said, well, I'll be fine. I'll do it. No one thought I could do it, apart from my personal trainer. And those people who didn't think I could do it, I don't think ill of them. I understand that why they would have thought I couldn't do it, because 6 months before I ran it, I could have run a mile and a bit. That's it. And ultramarathon runners are serious people. I mean, they're seriously able. And there were a few negative, like directly negative and quite caustic comments I heard from people in the office and so on. There was one chap Andy must have been in his 70s or 80s. He'd worked for my dad for a fair while. He was in World War II, and he was one of Montgomery's desert rats, as they called them, the ones that fought against Rommel in the Sahara campaign. And he said, I don't know why he's doing this. He'll never do it. And then he said, when I was in the war, it was a whole different situation. And I heard him say that. He didn't realize I heard him. So that charged me up a bit more. But I never thought about stopping. And the more I did it, the more I put one foot in front of the other, I believed I could do it. Yeah.
Were you still in the closet by the time you were doing this with your family? Because it sounds like your family, it's like a very traditional Indian family. You also mentioned an arranged marriage, and then you were gay. And my question is, how was your internal environment, your emotional environment, while doing all of this? And you were working for your family business as well. So I guess there's a lot of pressure. And I think any queer person will understand already the pressure that it means to have to pretend to be someone that you're not in many environments, at school, workplace, and family. So how was that combination for you?
It was an odd one because I hadn't come out to my family at that point. And there was a lot of misconception in my head. I did think that I'd come from a traditional family, but actually, if I'd inspected them more, they're actually incredibly progressive. And not that this is about my coming out story, but my coming out story was so bland because they were so accepting. I mean, it's actually quite boring. I wanted more drama in it, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, you don't want that. Believe me, you don't want that.
They were so accepting. They were so wonderful. And actually, when I look back at it, was me creating this idea of familial pressure and this idea of legacy and this sort of, it was a force of expectation. It was me creating all these things. And there wasn't a huge amount of evidence for my parents forcing me to do anything, really. The arranged marriage was suggested by my maternal granddad. And even then, my parents was like, oh, well, okay, that's what you want to do. And it's like, well, not really. But yes, back to the question, sorry. At that time, I wasn't out to my family, or indeed, hardly, I think one friend. And I was still very much under the fear that I can't be gay because I didn't think it'd be accepted. And we are talking to 2002, 2003 onwards, where things certainly, they were a lot better then than they were 20 years before. But where we are now, it was a whole different thing to then. Social acceptance was a different thing. And then there was this idea of not fitting into my family's business, and then not fitting into the family generally, and then not fitting into the world around me. And I could have spin them as positives, that it's nice to be an individual. But I didn't feel it like that. I felt quite lonely in these various different existences. And it was a struggle. I remember arriving at the marathon and I was walking around the camp the day before it started. And I heard these two guys who were young. They were younger than me, and they were from big grand families in England. And they said, oh, do you think there are any queers here? And that's back when the word queer wasn't used in the way that we use it today. It was a direct insult. It was a horrid, vicious word. Wonderfully and thankfully, we've taken that word back. We own that word now, and that's our word, and we're going to use it the way we want to. But back then, it was a really horrible insult. And I heard it, and I was walking in front of them, and it just sent a shrill, because even there in that place where it was mainly sort of a white European environment, there was no acceptance. I was scared of being myself there as well. So, yeah, I was battling all these things. And the marathon for me was a battle I had chosen so that I could therefore find some sort of identity in a new aspect of myself. And then the coming out came not very quickly after it, but a year or so after it. It was certainly the catalyst for it. It was certainly the catalyst, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I wonder if you kept doing this or running or doing marathons or ultra marathons, because I mean, we're still in the society where I said this a lot. Patriarchy is still like part of the structure of everything we do, and toxic masculinity is there. And I think this is very associated with sports as well, and this performance sports where you have to be like super strong and super fast and super everything, and this ultra, right? The word is there. And I would say it's still in some places, correct me if I'm wrong, this is not associated with gay or lesbians or any kind of minority in terms of gender. But since you've been there, and as you were saying it, there were these two chaps, what do you think is generally the idea of like a very mainly in quote unquote sports? And I guess my question is, how open do you think are sports right now, or these spaces nowadays with the queer community?
Yeah, I mean, the change in the last 20 or so years that I've witnessed has been extraordinary and beautiful. It's really, I mean, in all aspects of life. Sometimes it's a bit easy to say, oh, aren't things terrible and horrible? And of course, things are, things can be terrible and horrible. But if I look at the progress in social attitudes, in acceptance, certainly from the young people, it's just unbelievable. The things that they just accept nowadays, I just can't believe it sometimes. I just sit back and think, wow, we really are doing well. When it comes to sports, yes, there is a huge amount of acceptance now. Well, depending, I mean, on sport to sport. However, I do think this idea of, when it comes to men in sport, irrespective of their sexuality, this idea of being the alpha male, this sort of macho sense. And I don't think still there is any room for or appetite for failure, which I think is quite sad. I think this idea that we're still quite primed to the idea that only absolute success is what we're after. And it's becoming quite competitive now, I think, because of social media and so on. When I speak to young people, there is an extra burden they have to feel they have to be the absolute best. Especially young guys, their relationship with their body now is something which is quite fraught, because everywhere they're seeing images of physical perfection. And when then you code in the idea of sexuality as well, they don't know if the two can coexist. I mean, so it's a strange thing. There's certainly so much more acceptance now. I wouldn't say I'm a sports person. I go to the gym 6 days a week, so I am in that sense. But I don't consider my brain to be that of a sportsman. And you can go and join a football team now, or a rugby team, and be openly gay. You couldn't do that 20 years ago. You just couldn't. I mean, it would be treated in the most horrid way. So there is progress, but I'm not sure about if there's been progress in how we let the individuals be when they're playing those sports.
And it's also, I mean, but it is still striking to me that there are certain spaces where sort of queerness isn't allowed still. And I would say that like professional football, by football, I mean for American soccer, American football, NFL. I mean, I think there's not even, maybe there's like one person that's out that's currently playing, and like a few come out after they leave their professional teams. But it's actually wild in some ways. That is still a space where the acceptance is not high enough yet.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, because in soccer, certainly in the UK, I mean, it's such a huge sport in the UK. And I don't know hardly anything about football, but one thing I do know is there are very few out footballers. And just based on the statistics of how many gay men there are per 100 men, I mean, you'd expect a fair few hundred gay footballers. But there aren't. And attitudes have changed. And I mean, some people's coming out journeys are their own journeys and absolutely their own way of being. And there's nothing one should ever get involved in anyone else's journey. All I would gently advise people is that it's easier now than it was 20 years ago. the acceptance amongst those people in the stands in the towns across the UK is actually really quite high, irrespective of socioeconomic background, irrespective of education. There has been a seismic shift in social acceptance for queerness and for gay people. I'm talking about the UK and Europe, but I don't want to talk about places I don't know. But they'd be pushing at an open door now.
Yeah. And those comments of those two men just probably wouldn't happen today, I think, I hope. But I want to bring us back to the airport scene where you're clickety-clacketing. Like, I have to tell you something. Okay. For some reason, I've heard so many stories on the Storytelling Lisboa stage. And for me, this is a very strong image that I have of you, like clickety-clacketing with your Louis Vuitton suitcase trolling behind you. And then you arrive and everybody's in these like super athletic wear. And then you're there in your fancy clothes. And then, okay, in my head, I also have you with like a red mohawk. And in the story, you don't say this, but I'm telling myself that you must have told me this afterwards or something. So is there a detail about a red mohawk and some crazy hairdo that's missing that you want to fill in now for other people?
Yes, there is. The detail is that a week before this, I inadvertently was a L'Oreal hair model because my hairdresser, back then I was putting all different colours in my hair, and my hair was a lot longer than it is now, and it was straightened until the end of time. And then she was trying all these styles on, and she was doing this colouring thing on my hair, and said, can we go upstairs and have some photographs taken to use them in the salon? I said, all right, that's fine. And then fast forward a few weeks, she said, I didn't tell you the real purpose. I've entered you into the L'Oreal hair colour trophy, which is a trophy for hairdressers in the UK. It's an annual thing where you get your hair done in front of judges, and then you have to do a catwalk scene, an interview scene. It's a bit like Miss World, really. So that happened a week before. And I didn't win, but I just was enjoying the idea of being there. And I've never walked on a catwalk since, but it was extraordinary, really. And she'd themed me like an Indian prince. So my hair was done in this orangey red way, and I wore this Indian mandarin collar encrusted with jewels. And it was strange. On the catwalk, I just sort of came alive. I was flouncing away, throwing my robe over a place. And so, yes, the hair was because of the L'Oreal hair trophy. And that's why it was that specific shade of red, yes. And it was not quite mohawk, but it was in this like wild thin. And I had hair straighteners with me in my suitcase. I didn't really use them. But mind you, can I tell you one quick story about this?
Yeah.
I don't know whether I said this no, I don't think I did say it. Is that word got round after we'd finished the marathon. So they then put you in a hotel after they've taken you out the desert on these army trucks. They put you in a hotel for 2 days of sort of just like well done or commiseration or whatever. And then they feed you properly and give you finally a gin and tonic. And word got round that I have hair straighteners. And all of the ladies formed an orderly queue outside of my room because no one else thought to pack hair straighteners. But there was a gala dinner and people wanted to look great. And the rooms were like little villas on this very nice hotel thing. And I was sharing with my friend Roland. And my parents, who were following the whole marathon, they weren't allowed to be in the desert, but they were sort of at 5-star hotels near the checkpoint. At the end, they sent to the room this giant hamper of champagne and gin and chocolates and cheeses and things. And then all this queue of these ladies asking me to, can they borrow their hair straighteners? I said, I'll do it because I know what I'm doing with hair straight. You sit there, have a gin and tonic or a glass of champagne. And we had a great time. And I was there for 2 or 3 hours doing people's hair. Sorry, I digress, but that was
Oh my God, no, that's amazing. It's so funny.
My friend Roland thought I was a lunatic and he said, I'm going. He just sort of grabbed a beer or something. And then he just ran out.
I love that. I mean, of course, I'm a holistic therapist, so I see like these little dots connecting everywhere. And I do feel like hair, it's such an important thing of our being, and it changes so much the way we perceive ourselves in the world. And now that you mentioned that you had coincidentally a week earlier to this ultramarathon dyeing your hair kind of red and orangey, it's like, I don't know, I've seen like fire in your head. I don't know if this is connected or not, but I did this trip to Barcelona. My friend, she had her hair blue and she was like loving it and she feeling alive. And she was like, do you want me to dye your hair blue? And I'm like, I've never done this in my life, but I did it. And all of a sudden, people were staring at me and talking to me on the street because my hair was so different and they were loving it. And I don't know, I just felt like the blue came into my life through my hair and it gave me like a spark. I needed it. But now that you brought that up, do you think there was something to do about it? I mean, you had this whole line of girls just because your hair needs some specific care, and it provided you this amazing experience of probably connecting with other people from the ultra marathon in a different way that you probably couldn't have.
Yeah, I think very much so. I think in two ways it was important. Was one that I actually think that our aesthetic is something that is an important part of our mental well-being, because it's not, I don't really care what people think of me. It's what I think of me. And me having my hair done, I have my hair done every week. And I would feel sad if I don't have it done every week. Not because it suddenly grows, sprouts out like a madman after it, but it's just my aesthetic is part of me. And it's part of how I curate myself. And it's part of how I arm myself. And I'm doing it purely for me. So yes, this idea of the red hair, I do think it both subconsciously and even consciously had an impact. The other thing which I think it did, together with the clickety-clackety cowboy boots walking through Gatwick Airport terminal, was that it gave me difference and active difference. And my dress code for that flight, well, I always dress well for a flight, as everyone should, but I wanted to be the person that I always am. And I just knew that would be so different to everybody else, because I didn't want to take this thing actually too seriously. It's this thing that I'm doing at that time to get me into this next phase of life. I'm not going to become an ultra marathon runner. I'm not going to wander around live talking about fleece and blisters and so on, which I actually have to do quite a bit. I've been dined out on this story for a long time. But this ultra marathon is what I've done. It's to get me to a place and then I'll be something else. And so I dressed in that way. This wonderful cropped leather jacket. And it was these skinny jeans that sort of flared out. And then I had these cowboy boots. And they had like a Cuban heel on them. It was this big, the heel. And I'm quite short. I'm only 5'8". And I look quite tall. And then what with the extra sort of, hair, I look quite majestic. This sort of thing sort of marching towards them. And my poor friend Roland, he just buried his head.
My God.
And I said, who cares what people think? And that's always been my viewpoint. And they can be wearing all that mad polyester nonsense, but that doesn't mean that they're going to somehow be stronger or better or more able than I am.
And that's actually the next thing I want to talk about, because that is actually the thing. You do the Marathon des Sables and you finish the Marathon des Sables. And how many people go on it your year and how many people actually finished? Because a lot did not finish, correct?
Yeah, I think there was over 100 out of 600 that didn't finish. And to put that in perspective is that in order to do it, you have to not do a qualifier, but you have to prove that you're fit. I mean, you have to have certain tests done and so on. And also you pay quite a bit of money to do it. And you have to buy all the kit and all the little stoves and the horrible food that you have in bags. And Hungarian goulash for 6 days, that's what it was. So you have to spend quite a bit of money on this. So therefore it does weed out people in that you have to be quite serious. You have to kind of think that you're able. And I think everybody thought that they're able once they got onto it. The difference is that it's a physical exercise for sure, but it's a mental exercise more than anything. And I have countless stories of bumping into people there's this one chap, and he was almost double my size in every way. He was just giant block of muscle. And he was sort of like wearing all this stretchy things and had all these incredibly advanced sunglasses, and his backpack was designed by NASA. It all looked incredible. And he was giving all the big talk that, he's done this Ironman and this Iron thing and this swimming in a lake and all this stuff. And I thought, okay. And I was wearing these big baggy shorts and all these things. And then 2 days later, I found him on the side of a rock crying because he wasn't made for endurance. His body was made for short bursts of intense physical activity, but his mind wasn't. This is no slight to him, but he didn't consider it to be a mental exercise. Therefore, he didn't train his brain. And so it was, in a heap, and I picked him up and helped him across. So yes, it was a psychological exercise, probably more than it was a physical. Because when you do when you're in pain and your ankles are twisted and your toenails have all been had to pull them all off, and all spare 7 of them, and blisters are infected and bleeding shoulders, you have to make a decision that it hurts, yes, but can I still go on? And that's when the mind takes over from the body. And that's when you say yes. And that's when you just keep on going.
So you mentioned that, of course, this is a marathon that it goes for a week. You're running during the day, sleeping during the night. And you mentioned that you spend like most of the craziest hours and the happiest moments also during this week. But do you remember some specific, like what was your lowest or what was your highest during this week?
Yes, there are a few. I would say the lowest was, it was on the big day where you had to run 50 or so miles. And that's as the crow flies. So it's actually a lot more than that because you're going up and down and you kind of thing. And that, I think that took me 22 hours, 23 hours. And it was about 2 a.m. and I had a head torch on and it was, it's very sparse. I couldn't see anyone. And it was pitch black and there wasn't anything. So I ran, but what I didn't realize was I was on the top of a very high dune and the ridge wasn't going like this. It was going that way. And I just fell down the dune and I was just rolling. I instantly knew I was all right physically, but you get to the bottom of this thing and you're crumpled and you can hear your saucepans like flapping away and you can, then suddenly all that pain that you've been fighting away because your brain just says, oh, and it stops for a minute, it gives in for a second. And then every part of me started to just ache and hurt. And I was just in this little heap. And then you just have to get yourself together and then try and think about getting back to the top of this ridge. And I was in a lot of pain and I was totally alone in every sense. People around me, well, there are probably a few, but I couldn't see them. But there was no amount of, my dad's money is going to help me in that moment. When they talk about privilege, well, at that moment, I was absolutely unprivileged. I was relying entirely on my own ability. And that sounds sort of resolved now, but you just have to make a decision very quickly. That's what I do. And it was horrible. And I was emotional. And I got back and I thought, and then you carry on like a little, tiny camel and off you go. And that was probably the lowest because it was for the only time I let the physical pain overwhelm me. And then it then turned into an emotional pain and it lasted a few seconds. And interestingly, and my dad doesn't ever make anything up. He said to me afterwards, he said, did you have a problem at 2 or 3 in the morning on this particular day? Because I just jumped out of bed. It was over in the hotel and we went and just said, I think he's got a problem.
Oh my God.
And I went, yes, I did. I said I was rolling down this thing. Now, I don't believe in, I don't know what believe in, but who knows? But that was strange. It was strange. Yeah. Who knows what happened? But the fact that he said that thing, yeah. And I didn't tell him that story. So that was the lowest, low enough for it to trundle through the atmosphere and wake my dad up. And then the highest, I would say, was, apart from obviously the finishing line and all those other moments, but the highest was at the end of that day, that same day, and it was in the middle of the morning or whenever it was we got through to the thing. I hadn't made friends with these people, but they were talking to me in the most wonderful way. They were members of the British Army, and I think they were members of the serious bit of the British Army because they were very capable. And they were in their 40s, and they were so kind and polite to me and so lovely. This is the kind of event that they do in their holiday because they're mad. And they'd completed this big day many hours before me because they're really able. But then as I approached the end of that day, and they'd put out these big sort of like balloon things as to guide everyone in the middle of the Sahara, they were all waiting for me. These 3 soldiers were waiting for me because they were so emotionally behind me, this idea of this me from nowhere, this little nobody. As I came closer, they formed sort of a little guard of honor either side of me. And they sort of carried me over that day, over that line on that day. And then they all cheered me at the end. And I never saw them afterwards, other than at the thing. They certainly weren't in the queue to get their hair straightened.
But that's so sweet of them.
Yeah, I'd never seen them since, but it was that pure sort of like kindness.
Yeah.
And they could have gone back to the camp and they could have started to prepare their food and rehydrated, but they didn't. They just waited and waited for hours for me. Just for me, because I was the ultimate underdog and they'd been through all sorts in their lives and they saw that I was going through all sorts in my life in that moment. And it was so lovely. I'll never forget that wonderful random act of human kindness. It was so beautiful. And for all the people talking about, are there any queers here? And, oh, this guy can't do it and all this nonsense. There's the other side of it as well. I mean, human beings are beautiful and they demonstrated that sort of like raw human beauty. So I think it's wonderful.
Oh, I love that. Okay, can I ask a few, because we're coming near the end of the time, but I have a few logistical questions because I need to know certain things. One, I need to know how many calories would you be eating a day on these runs? Because I don't know, I feel like you need like, I don't know, 20,000 calories. I don't know how much, and you have to carry it. So this is a tricky thing.
Yeah, I don't really know how many calories I ate. I know that the only way we could eat food was in these army ration packs that we had to buy, and then we had to rehydrate and warm up. And they're calorie intensive. They're about 1,000 calories per one, or maybe even more than that. It was certainly eating less than I should have done. I think you'd probably need at least 4,000 or 5,000 calories, I'd say, a day. But I really wasn't. I was eating far less because there's no real time to. I mean, in the evening, you can rehydrate this thing, but you've got zero energy. And then during the day, you just chewed energy bars. And this was 20 years ago, and energy bars tasted like death. I mean, it was this horrible, horrible, chewy, saccharine thing. And then you were taking all these sugary, pouchy things. I don't know how many calories I ate under than I needed to. I drank a tremendous amount of water. And I lost quite a bit of weight on that run. And I grew a beard for the only time in my life, because obviously there's no sort of like, there are no bathrooms or salons en route. So there were no mirrors even. So I just, threw the razor to the wind and just grew this beard. And my mom didn't recognize me when I crossed the finishing line. I had to sort of wave at her.
And how often are you walking versus how often are you running? And are you doing it at night or during the day? Like what? Because I'm imagining you avoid the hottest times of the day, right? That's your rest time maybe, or?
No, you go for it at the hottest time of the day. That's when they push you through.
What's the temperature at the hottest time of the day?
I remember going through a checkpoint, and the man as you sort of run through, and I grabbed my water, he said it's 51 degrees centigrade today.
Okay, I'm sorry. And because actually my family that's insane. Because my family lives in Marrakesh and we go in August sometimes. And I've been there when it's like 47. And I mean, I don't move. Like, I can't move. And it's like, no way. Yeah. And I don't go outside during that time. So to be running out in the elements, whew, it's wild.
It was a strange thing. And you can't really sweat because the sweat happens and then it just vaporizes. So you have this tiny, wee little cloud around your face the entire time. It feels like a little cloud. It feels like this little sort of haze. So that was the heat. And regarding the running and the versus walking, it's a difficult one because you sort of adopt like a shuffle that's a half run, half walk sort of. And then sometimes you just do walk and sometimes you do run really quickly when you have to kind of, get down the up and down things. So it's hard to say how often it was. I was certainly running more than I was walking, like proper walking. But I suppose this sort of half run, half walk thing, this shuffle, what I was doing the most.
Oh my God. I feel like it's just such an amazing mental feat. This is the thing, mental feat, physical feat as well, but mental. And I don't have that. I can't tolerate pain. My mind goes the other direction as yours. So I am just in awe of that. Okay, we have to wrap it up, which I'm sad about because I have more questions. But we have one final question for you, and that is, how has it been for you to revisit your story today?
Really great, because I'm really proud of myself for doing this thing. I know one shouldn't talk about these things, but I'm so glad I did that because it was something that changed my life in every aspect, in who I was as a person, in being open and proud of my sexuality, in being able to just do mad new things, in moving around the world, in being able to be on the moment as well. So, and just this idea of change and movement. And I think I mentioned I have a podcast myself, and one of the things that I mentioned in this one recent episode was this idea, there's this constant idea of movement and change and recreating yourself. And I think that's been the greatest legacy of not being stuck in the moment. And just knowing that I, like every single other person on this planet, are extraordinary. We really are amazing. We can achieve such things. And if I can do it, if I can get my mad little body over all those miles, then anybody can, because we're all wonderful. I mean, that sounds all a bit sort of new age and mad, but it has reminded me today, talking about it, of just how extraordinary we all are and how extraordinary I was doing that thing, because I'm so grateful for that mad little 23-year-old, whoever he was, who turned on that TV and some little voice deep within him said, just do this thing. And then, my goodness, it's led to so many wonderful things. Do crazy things as well, but mainly wonderful things.
That's it for this episode of What Lingers.
If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more listeners. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, we'd love for you to share this episode with them.
What Lingers is a podcast from the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, and is produced by both Liz and I, and edited by Liz.
We're a small project, and your support truly motivates us to keep going.
Would also love to hear from you. Feel free to send us a DM or even a voice note with your thoughts, your comments, or questions to our Instagram @WhatLingersPod.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow us so you never miss what lingers next.
Bye!
Bye!